I stared at my phone in disbelief, reading the text message for the 5th time, hoping the words might somehow change. They didn't. I'm really sorry, but you're no longer invited to the wedding. My sister Brooke had just uninvited me from her wedding. The same wedding I had spent $45,000 of my life savings to fund. The same wedding where I was supposed to be the maid of honor just 2 weeks ago. My hands trembled as another text came through. The Camerons don't feel comfortable with your lifestyle being represented at their family event. They're contributing so much to our future, I can't risk upsetting them. I hope you understand. I didn't understand. Not even slightly. I had sacrificed everything to give Brooke the wedding of her dreams. And now, I was being erased because her wealthy future in-laws were uncomfortable with who I was. In that moment, sitting alone in my apartment, I realized something important. Every single vendor contract for this $60,000 wedding was in my name. And I still had access to all of them. Growing up in rural Georgia wasn't easy for our family. Our small house always needed repairs, and money was constantly tight. Mom worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse while Dad picked up whatever construction jobs he could find. Despite the financial struggles, we had each other, and my parents made sure Brooke and I never felt like we were missing out on anything important. That all changed on a rainy Tuesday night when I was 22. The police officer at our door informed me that my parents' car had hydroplaned on the highway. Neither survived the crash. At 22, I became solely responsible for 16-year-old Brooke. I had just been accepted to the University of Georgia with a full scholarship to study business. But with Brooke still in high school, and no other family to help us, I made the only decision I could. I deferred my acceptance, took over the mortgage payments on our parents' house, and worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Morning shifts at the local diner, afternoon bookkeeping for small businesses in town, and weekend retail work at the mall. By the time Brooke graduated high school 2 years later, I had managed to save enough for her first year of college. She'd always been the smart one, earning a partial scholarship to the University of Georgia. I continued working and sending her whatever money I could, often skipping meals to make sure her tuition was paid on time. 4 years later, when Brooke graduated with a marketing degree, I felt like all the sacrifices had been worth it. She landed an excellent job at a prestigious marketing firm in Atlanta, while I had built a modest bookkeeping business that allowed me to pay the bills, even if luxury was still out of reach. Last year, when Brooke called to tell me she'd met someone special, I was thrilled for her. Parker Cameron came from a wealthy Atlanta family with connections throughout the Southeast. After dating for a year, they got engaged, and Brooke immediately asked me to be her maid of honor. I was touched and accepted without hesitation. Everything seemed perfect until the evening after their engagement party. Brooke showed up at my apartment in tears, something I hadn't seen since our parents' funeral. "The Camerons expect us to have this enormous wedding," she sobbed, collapsing onto my worn sofa. Parker's sister had her reception at the Whitley in Buckhead with 300 guests. His mother mentioned how excited she was to plan something even more special for her only son. Brooke's hands twisted nervously in her lap. Parker's family has this reputation to maintain. His dad's on the board of 3 companies. They expect champagne fountains and ice sculptures I can't afford any of that on my salary, and Parker's just starting his law career. If we can't have the wedding they expect, they'll think I'm not good enough for their son. They already look at me like I'm some charity case he picked up. Seeing my little sister break down like that brought back all those protective feelings from when our parents died. Without thinking twice, I made an offer that would change everything. "I have some savings," I said. "Enough to help with a nice wedding. Let me do this for you, Brooke." Her eyes widened. "But that's your money for going back to school. You've been saving for years." I shook my head. "Your happiness matters more to me. We're family, and family takes care of each other, right?" What I didn't tell her was that my sum savings was actually $45,000, every penny I'd managed to save over 12 years. Working extra clients and living frugally. It was supposed to be my chance to finally finish my degree and move to a bigger city. But in that moment, seeing my sister's tearful smile as she hugged me tight, I convinced myself this was a better investment. We'll keep it simple but elegant, I promised. The Camerons will never know the difference. Little did I know that my generosity would set in motion a chain of events that would end with me staring at a text message uninvited from the very wedding I had sacrificed everything to fund. The morning after agreeing to fund Brooke's wedding, I created a detailed spreadsheet of what we could afford with my savings. I knew nothing about wedding planning, but I was good with numbers and budgets. Venue, catering, flowers, photography, dress, I researched costs for everything and carved out what seemed like a reasonable plan for a wedding that would impress the Camerons without completely draining my account. Over the next few weeks, I worked overtime with my bookkeeping clients to free up more hours for wedding planning. Brooke and I toured venues across Atlanta, finally settling on a historic garden estate that came with a restored ballroom. The moment we walked in, Brooke gasped and squeezed my hand. "This is it. This is perfect." The venue cost $15,000 for a Saturday in June, a third of my entire budget, but seeing her face light up made it seem worth every penny. I signed all the contracts myself, putting down deposits from my savings account. The venue coordinator seemed surprised when I handed over my credit card instead of Brooke's, but I explained I was giving the wedding as a gift to my sister. She smiled warmly at that, telling me what a wonderful sister I was. At the time, her words made me feel proud. With the venue secured, we moved on to other vendors. Top-tier catering, a well-known local florist, a photographer whose work had been featured in wedding magazines. For each one, I was the one who signed the contracts and paid the deposits. Brooke would occasionally offer to contribute, but her salary barely covered her Atlanta apartment rent, and I insisted she save what she could for her future with Parker. As planning progressed, Brooke became increasingly preoccupied with impressing Parker's family. She'd call me late at night panicking about whether the selected linens were the right shade of ivory or if we needed to upgrade from regular champagne to Dom Pérignon for the toast. The Camerons only drink certain brands, she explained after requesting an additional $2,000 for premium alcohol. Margaret made this comment at dinner about people who serve cheap champagne. Margaret Cameron, Parker's mother, had become a frequent topic in our conversations, though I hadn't yet met her. From Brooke's descriptions, she was elegantly intimidating, the kind of Southern woman who could deliver a cutting insult wrapped in a compliment so sweet you'd thank her for it. Our first meeting with the Cameron family happened 6 months before the wedding at an upscale restaurant in Buckhead. I spent $300 I couldn't afford on a new dress, determined to make a good impression. As Brooke and I walked into the private dining room, I immediately felt underdressed despite my new purchase. Margaret Cameron was tall and slender, with perfectly coiffed silver blonde hair. She air-kissed Brooke's cheeks before turning to me with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So you're the famous Azalea," she said, her gaze sweeping over me. "Brooke has told us so much about how you raised her after your parents' unfortunate accident. So brave of you to give up college. I'm sure it was quite the sacrifice." Her words sounded complimentary, but her tone suggested she found my life choices quaint, like I was a character in some poverty drama she'd watched on television. Parker's father, James Cameron, was more direct. After asking about my job and hearing I ran a bookkeeping service for small businesses, he simply nodded and turned his attention back to his son, dismissing me from the conversation entirely. Throughout dinner, I noticed Brooke transform before my eyes. Her usual relaxed laugh was replaced with a restrained giggle. She sat straighter, spoke differently, even held her fork the way Margaret did. When the topic of the wedding came up, Margaret dominated the conversation. The Hartwell wedding last spring had 6 bridesmaids, all in custom gowns, she mentioned casually. I believe they flew in a designer from New York. So tasteful. Brooke glanced at me nervously before responding. We're considering custom options too. Azalea and I have appointments at 3 boutiques next week. We had no such appointments, and custom gowns weren't in our budget. I stayed silent, not wanting to contradict my sister in front of her future in-laws. The real shock came during the bridesmaid dress fitting a month later. Margaret had insisted on accompanying us, something Brooke had failed to mention until Margaret was walking toward us at the boutique. While Brooke was trying on a potential maid of honor gown, Margaret casually inquired about my personal life. Brooke mentions you're very independent, she said, sipping champagne the boutique had provided. No serious relationship on the horizon. Actually, I've been with my girlfriend Taylor for about 2 years now, I replied, trying to keep my voice casual. She's a teacher at the high school in our hometown. Margaret's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. A girlfriend. How modern. She took another sip of champagne. I suppose that lifestyle is becoming more common these days. Even in Georgia, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. When Brooke emerged from the dressing room, Margaret immediately steered the conversation to whether the neckline of the dress was appropriate for a family event. On the drive home, Brooke was unusually quiet. Finally, as we neared my apartment, she cleared her throat. As about what you mentioned to Margaret today. She began hesitantly. You mean about Taylor? What about it? Brooke sighed. The Camerons are very traditional. Old Georgia money, you know. They donate to certain political causes. And their church is really conservative. Okay, I said slowly, not liking where this was heading. Could you maybe just tone it down around them? Not mention Taylor or anything about your lifestyle choices. Just until after the wedding. It would make everything so much easier. I stared at my sister in disbelief. Tone down who I am. My lifestyle choices? You mean the fact that I'm gay? Please don't make this a big deal, Brooke pleaded. It's just for a few months, and it would mean so much to me. The Camerons are going to be my family too. After everything I'd done, giving up my education, raising her, and now funding her entire wedding, Brooke was asking me to hide an essential part of who I was to please people who couldn't even be bothered to treat me with basic time, respect. But as I looked at her anxious face, I remembered the frightened 16-year-old who had depended on me after our parents died. Against my better judgment, I nodded. Fine, I won't mention Taylor around them. Brooke's relief was palpable as she hugged me. Thank you, Az. You're the best sister ever. As I watched her drive away, I had no idea just how much more she would ask me to sacrifice before this wedding was over. The next 3 months of wedding planning brought a noticeable shift in my relationship with Brooke. Our weekly sister nights, a tradition we'd maintained since she moved to Atlanta, were repeatedly canceled. The first time she had dinner with Parker's parents. The second time, it was drinks with Parker's sister. By the third cancellation, I stopped expecting her to keep our plans. The Camerons invited us to their country club, she explained over the phone, sounding harried. I can't say no, Az. These connections are important for Parker's career. I understood ambition. What I couldn't understand was how quickly Brooke seemed to be shedding her old life and me along with it. One Tuesday evening in April, about 4 months before the wedding, I was grabbing takeout from an upscale restaurant near my client's office when I spotted Brooke across the dining room. She was seated with Parker and his parents at a table by the window, laughing at something James Cameron said. I waved, expecting her to come over and say hello. Our eyes met briefly. There was a flash of recognition in hers, followed by something that looked like panic. Then she turned away, pretending she hadn't seen me. I stood frozen near the entrance, takeout bag in hand, watching my sister deliberately ignore me. The hostess asked if everything was all right, and I mumbled something before hurrying outside, my cheeks burning with humiliation. That night I called Brooke, determined to understand what had happened. Oh, Az, I'm so sorry about that, she said, sounding genuinely contrite. I didn't want to make things awkward. Margaret had just been talking about the wedding guest list and how important it was to have the right people there. If I'd acknowledged you, they would have felt obligated to invite you to join us, and then Margaret would have started asking questions about you again. So you decided it was better to pretend I don't exist? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. You know it wasn't like that, Brooke insisted. This wedding is putting so much stress on me. The Camerons have expectations, and I'm trying to meet them, while also planning everything with you. I feel pulled in a million different directions. I wanted to point out that I was doing most of the actual planning, while also paying for everything, but instead I found myself apologizing. I understand. It's fine. Let's just focus on the wedding. As maid of honor, I tried to arrange a lunch meeting to discuss the bachelorette party plans. Brooke canceled an hour before we were supposed to meet, sending a text that read, "Can't make it. Margaret is taking me to meet her personal shopper for honeymoon clothes. Rain check." The rain check never came. Instead, Brooke began sending me links to articles about wedding etiquette and bridal beauty tips. "Maybe try this haircut," she texted one day with a link to a style that looked nothing like anything I'd ever worn. "It might suit the wedding photos better." Another day, "Have you thought about teeth whitening before the wedding? Margaret knows someone who does it for all the society events." Each suggestion felt less like sisterly advice and more like an attempt to remake me into someone the Camerons would find acceptable. I started to dread her texts. Then came the email. Brooke had accidentally copied me on a message intended for Margaret. The subject line read, "Re-guest list concerns. I completely understand your concerns about elevating the guest list," Brooke had written. "I've been thinking about ways to address the situation with Azalea's friends as well. Perhaps we can seat them at the far tables near the kitchen. That way they'll be less visible in the main reception space." My friends, including Taylor, were being treated as embarrassments to be hidden away. I felt sick reading it, but I didn't confront Brooke. I was still clinging to the hope that once the wedding was over, my real sister would return. The final straw came 8 weeks before the wedding, when I discovered that Brooke and Margaret had gone behind my back to change my maid of honor speech. I'd found the document accidentally while using Brooke's laptop to update the seating chart. There it was in a folder labeled Wedding Speeches, revised, a completely rewritten version of the personal, heartfelt speech I'd been working on for months. The new version contained none of the memories I'd wanted to share, nothing about how Brooke and I had supported each other after our parents died, or the silly traditions we'd created to keep their memory alive. Instead, it was full of generic platitudes about marriage and vague references to Brooke's journey to finding Parker. It might as well have been written for a stranger. That same day, while looking for the invoice for the florist in Brooke's wedding planning binder, I discovered they'd also altered my bridesmaid dress order. The original form had been crossed out, and a new one had been filled in with measurements 2 sizes larger than mine. The alterations would make the dress hang awkwardly on my frame, making me look frumpy next to the other bridesmaids. I confronted Brooke that evening, trying to keep my voice steady as I asked her about the speech and the dress. "Oh, that," she said dismissively. "Margaret thought your original speech was a bit too personal for the crowd we'll have. And the dress adjustment is just to make sure you're comfortable. The original cut might have been a bit revealing for a family event." "A bit revealing?" I repeated incredulously. "Brooke, it was a standard bridesmaid dress with the same neckline as everyone else's. And that speech? Those were our memories, our stories." Brooke's expression hardened slightly. "This wedding isn't just about us, it's about joining families. The Camerons have certain standards for how things should be presented. I need this day to be perfect." "Perfect for whom?" I asked quietly. "Because it's starting to feel like it's perfect for the Camerons, not for you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why can't you just support me on this? After everything you've done, why get hung up on small details now?" That was the moment I should have walked away. I should have told her that I wouldn't be manipulated, or erased that my support didn't extend to denying who I was, or allowing myself to be humiliated. I should have reminded her that family, real family, accepts you as you are. Instead, I apologized. Again. "You're right," I said, hating myself for the words even as I spoke them. "This is your day. Whatever makes you happy." I continued paying the vendor installments, telling myself that family loyalty mattered most. That once the wedding was over, things would go back to normal. That my sister, the real Brooke I had raised and loved, was still in there somewhere, just temporarily lost in wedding stress and the allure of the Cameron lifestyle. I was wrong on all counts. 2 weeks before the wedding, I drove to the venue for the final walkthrough. This was the moment when all our planning would come together, checking the layout, confirming the timeline, and finalizing details with all the vendors. Despite the growing tension between us, I was excited. This was the culmination of nearly a year of hard work and my entire life savings. I arrived early, parking my modest Honda next to a row of luxury cars. As I walked toward the garden entrance, I spotted Brooke standing with Margaret Cameron and a woman I didn't recognize. They were laughing, heads bent together over a tablet, displaying what looked like seating arrangements. Azalea Brooke called out, her voice overly bright. "You're here. Great. I want you to meet Jasmine, my college roommate." The woman, tall, blonde, and impeccably dressed in a way that screamed Cameron approved, extended her hand. "So nice to finally meet you. Brooke has told me all about everything you've done for the wedding. Jasmine has kindly agreed to step in as maid of honor," Margaret added, watching my reaction with barely concealed satisfaction. "We thought it would take some pressure off you since you've already done so much with the planning and financing." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I looked at Brooke, waiting for her to correct this obvious mistake, to say this was some kind of misunderstanding. Instead, she avoided my gaze, suddenly fascinated by a nearby floral arrangement. "Could I speak to my sister privately for a moment?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding strangely calm, despite the rushing in my ears. Brooke nodded tersely and led me to a small anteroom off the main hall. As soon as the door closed behind us, I turned to her. "What the hell, Brooke, you're replacing me as maid of honor, and didn't even tell me yourself." She twisted her engagement ring nervously. "I was going to tell you today. It's just, the Camerons feel the maid of honor should be someone who better represents the values of both families." "The values," I repeated. "You mean someone straight, someone who looks the part, someone the Camerons approve of?" "It's not just that," Brooke said quickly. "It's complicated. Parker's parents are contributing significantly to our future. They're helping with the down payment on a house in Buckhead, and James is bringing Parker into his firm as a junior partner. They've made it clear that these things are contingent on the wedding meeting certain standards. And I don't meet those standards," I said flatly. Brooke sighed. "You'll still have an important role. You'll be like the coordinator, making sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes." "Behind the scenes," I echoed, "where no one has to see me." "Please try to understand," she pleaded. "This is about our future. Parker and I can't afford to alienate his family. They control everything. His career, our social standing, all of it." I looked at my sister, this person I'd raised, whose college education I'd helped fund by working 3 jobs, whose wedding I was paying for with every penny I'd saved, and saw a stranger. She was willing to push me into the shadows to please people who would never truly accept her unless she erased every trace of where she came from. "Fine," I said, too numb to argue further. "Whatever you want. It's your wedding." I left the venue shortly after telling Brooke I wasn't feeling well. For the next several days, I cried more than I had since our parents died. Taylor came over, held me while I sobbed, and suggested I withdraw my financial support for the wedding. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Despite everything, Brooke was still my sister, and I'd made a promise. A week before the wedding, I received an invitation to the rehearsal dinner. It was being held at the Cameron family's country club, and the invitation specified cocktail attire. I spent another $200 I couldn't afford on an appropriate dress, and arranged for Taylor to drive me since parking at the club was limited. When we arrived, Taylor squeezed my hand. "Text me when you're ready to be picked up. And remember that you deserve basic respect. Don't let them make you feel small." I nodded, leaned over to kiss her quickly, and then headed to the entrance. The security guard stopped me at the door. "Name?" he asked, scanning a list. "Azalea Peterson. I'm the bride's sister." He ran his finger down the page, then looked up with a frown. "I'm sorry, but you're not on the list." "There must be a mistake," I insisted. "I'm Brooke Peterson's sister. The maid of, I'm in the wedding party." The guard shook his head. "If you're not on the list, I can't let you in. Those are the rules." As I argued with him, I noticed Margaret Cameron watching from just inside the doorway. She spoke briefly to a club employee who then approached us. "Is there a problem?" the employee asked the guard. "This woman claims to be in the wedding party, but she's not on the approved list," the guard explained. "I see," the employee said smoothly. "I'm afraid we'll have to ask you to leave the premises, ma'am. This is a private event." "But my sister," I began. If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll have to escort you out, he interrupted firmly. Over his shoulder, I could see Margaret watching the scene unfold, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Next to her stood Brooke, who quickly turned away when our eyes met. Humiliated, I walked back to the parking lot and called Taylor to come get me. As I waited, my phone buzzed with a text from Brooke. "Where are you? Dinner's starting." I stared at the message in disbelief. She knew exactly where I was being thrown out of her rehearsal dinner while she watched. I didn't respond. The next morning, 2 days before the wedding, I received the text that would change everything. "I'm really sorry, but you're no longer invited to the wedding." I called Brooke immediately, but the call went to voicemail. Instead, another text came through. "The Camerons discovered some pictures of you and Taylor on social media. They say they can't have that kind of lifestyle represented at a family event, especially with Parker's grandparents and their church friends attending." I tried to reason with them, but they're adamant. They're threatening to withdraw all their support if I don't comply. "I'm so sorry." I sat on my couch, phone in hand, trying to process what was happening. Not only had I been demoted from maid of honor to behind-the-scenes coordinator, but now I was being banned from attending altogether. The wedding I had sacrificed everything to pay for. An hour later, I received another series of texts from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Margaret Cameron. I want to make it clear that while we appreciate your financial contribution to Brooke's special day, your presence would make many of our guests uncomfortable. Brooke has explained that you paid for certain aspects of the wedding as a gift, and gifts don't come with conditions. I'm sure as someone who cares for your sister, you'll want her day to be perfect. That means understanding when to step back." I was still reeling from this message when my phone rang. It was my friend Diane, who worked at the same marketing firm as Brooke. "I need to tell you something," she said, sounding upset. "I overheard Brooke talking to some colleagues at lunch today. She's been telling people that she paid for the wedding herself, that she's been saving for years. When someone mentioned you, she said you'd offered to help with some small expenses, but that she'd handled the bulk of it herself. She also said, 'God, I hate to tell you this.'" "Tell me," I said, feeling strangely calm. "She said you've been difficult about the wedding plans, trying to make everything about your agenda instead of her big day. She implied you were jealous of her relationship with Parker because you can't have a normal wedding yourself." After I hung up with Diane, I sat in stunned silence. My sister hadn't just excluded me from her wedding. She was actively spreading lies about me to justify it. She was taking credit for my financial sacrifice while painting me as the villain in her story. In that moment, something inside me broke. The sister I had raised, the person for whom I had sacrificed my education, my savings, and my dignity, had decided I was expendable. Worse than expendable, I was an embarrassment she needed to erase. I picked up my phone and looked at the wedding planning app where all the vendor contracts were stored. Every single one had my name on it. Every single one had been paid from my bank account, and every single one could still be canceled. For 24 hours after learning I'd been uninvited from Brooke's wedding, I barely functioned. I called in sick to work, ignored my clients' emails, and stayed in bed staring at the ceiling. Taylor brought over soup and sat with me, but I hardly spoke. The betrayal was too fresh, too deep, like a physical wound that made it difficult to breathe. "She's my sister," I kept saying. "I raised her. How could she do this?" By the second morning, exhaustion gave way to a strange clarity. I picked up my phone and called Taylor. "What would happen?" I asked. When she answered if I canceled all the wedding vendors. There was a long pause before Taylor responded. "You mean legally?" "Well, the contracts are all in your name. You paid the deposits and the installments. Legally, you probably could cancel them. But should I?" I whispered. Taylor sighed. "I can't answer that for you, What Brooke did was cruel and selfish. But canceling her wedding would be a bridge burned forever. You need to be sure it's what you want." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and started reviewing the contracts. Taylor was right, every single one listed me as the client. The venue catering, flowers, photography, DJ cake, all of it was legally under my control. Most had cancellation clauses that would require fees, but those fees would be substantially less than what I'd already invested. I pulled up the text messages from Brooke and Margaret, reading them again. Gifts don't come with conditions, Margaret had written, as if my entire life savings was just a casual present given with no expectation of even basic respect in return. I opened my files and found the spreadsheet tracking all wedding expenses. $45,000 from my savings. Another $8,000 from recent paychecks and credit card debt I'd taken on to cover unexpected costs that had emerged during planning. $53,000 total, more than my annual income. All to fund a wedding I was now banned from attending because the groom's parents objected to who I loved. Still, I hesitated. Despite everything, Brooke was my only family. If I did this, there would be no going back. Was I really prepared to sever that bond completely? Then my phone pinged with a notification from Instagram. A mutual friend had tagged me in a comment. Curious, I opened the app and found myself looking at a photo posted from the rehearsal dinner I'd been barred from attending. It showed Brooke Parker and the Camerons laughing at their table. The caption read, "Final rehearsal dinner before the big day." I scrolled down to the comments and found what I'd been tagged in. It was a response from Brooke to someone who had asked if I would be taking photos at the wedding. Her reply made my blood run cold. Azalea's actually not involved with the wedding anymore. Creative differences, if you know what I mean. Some people just can't set aside their own issues to celebrate someone else's happiness. She had publicly painted me as the problem, as someone selfish who couldn't be happy for her. After everything I had sacrificed. As I stared at those words, my phone rang. It was Diane again. "I thought you should know," she said without preamble. "Brooke told Parker's sister that after the wedding she plans to take a break from you. She said she needs to focus on building relationships with the Camerons without complications from her past." That was the moment my decision crystallized. Brooke wasn't just excluding me from her wedding, she was planning to cut me out of her life entirely once she'd gotten what she needed from me. I'd been her safety net, her support system, her bank account, but now that she had the Camerons, I was disposable. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and called my friend Jack, who was an attorney. "I need legal advice," I said when he answered. "If I cancel vendors for an event I've paid for, but won't be attending, what's my liability?" Jack asked several clarifying questions, then offered his assessment. "If the contracts are in your name, and you've been the one making payments, you likely have the legal right to cancel. There might be cancellation fees, but since you're the contracted client, you're within your rights. I'd document everything, the payments you've made, the notification that you're no longer welcome at the event, any communication showing that you're being excluded despite being the financial backer." "Could Brooke or the Camerons sue me?" I asked. "They could try," Jack said carefully. "But based on what you've told me, they'd have a weak case. You're not obligated to fund an event you've been explicitly uninvited from. Just make sure to follow the cancellation procedures in each contract and document everything." After thanking him, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list of every vendor, their contact information, and the cancellation policy for each. Then I took a deep breath and made the first call. "Hello, this is Azalea Peterson. I need to cancel the wedding reception booked for June 15th. The venue coordinator sounded confused. "Cancel? But we just had the final walkthrough. Is everything all right?" "No," I said honestly. "The bride has uninvited me from the wedding, which I've been paying for. I'm no longer willing to fund an event I'm not welcome to attend." There was an awkward pause before the coordinator responded. "I see. I'm very sorry to hear that. There is a cancellation fee of 30% of the remaining balance, since we're within 30 days of the event." "I understand," I replied. "I'll pay the fee." One by one I contacted each vendor. Most were sympathetic once I explained the situation. A few even waived the cancellation fees after hearing my story. With each call, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I was burning a bridge with my only sister, but I was also finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of putting her needs first. The last call was to the venue security team. I arranged for the gates to remain locked on the wedding day. No one would be able to access the property without my authorization. Not even the Camerons, with all their wealth and connections. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. I had systematically dismantled the entire wedding. The venue was canceled. The caterers wouldn't be coming. The flowers wouldn't be delivered. The photographer, the DJ, the cake, all of it was gone. I sent one final email to the venue coordinator. Please confirm that the property will be secure and inaccessible on June 15th. No vendors should be permitted entry. If anyone attempts to claim they're taking over the contracts, please refer them to me directly. Her response came quickly. Confirmed. The property will remain locked. We have noted that no changes to the cancellation should be accepted without direct authorization from you as the contracting client. I closed my laptop and looked at my phone. There were no messages from Brooke. She had no idea what I'd just done, and she wouldn't know not until the moment when the wedding guests arrived to find an empty, locked venue with no flowers, no food, and no celebration. Part of me felt sick at the thought of the public humiliation that would cause. But another part, the part that had been dismissed, devalued, and discarded by the sister I'd sacrificed everything for, felt something different. It felt like justice. On what should have been Brooke's wedding day, I woke up early but made no move to get out of bed. Taylor had offered to come over, but I'd declined. This was something I needed to face alone. By 9 in the morning, my phone started buzzing with texts from friends who knew I'd been involved in the wedding planning. Are you at the venue? Is everything okay with the wedding? I ignored them all. At 10:30, the first call from Brooke came through. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. I turned my phone to silent and made myself a cup of coffee, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. Just before noon, a text came from my friend Ryan, who had been invited to the wedding as a guest. Something weird is happening. We're all at the venue, but the gates are locked. No one can get in and no one's answering the phones. I stared at his message, imagining the scene. Guests in formal attire standing around in the June heat, confused and increasingly concerned. The Camerons trying to maintain their composure while frantically calling the venue staff. Brooke in her wedding dress slowly, realizing that her perfect day was unraveling. Ryan sent a video a few minutes later. It showed at least 50 people gathered outside the venue's ornate gates. Some were on phones. Others were talking in agitated clusters. I could make out Parker in his tuxedo speaking intensely to what looked like the venue's security guard. In the background, Margaret Cameron was gesturing emphatically while talking to someone on her phone. I turned my phone back to regular mode, and immediately it began ringing. Brooke. I took a deep breath and answered. What did you do? She screamed, her voice so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Exactly what you should have expected, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. No invite, no wedding? Are you insane? Brooke's voice cracked with fury and panic. There are 200 people standing outside the venue. Parker's entire family is here. His grandparents flew in from California. And I spent $53,000 on a wedding I'm not welcome to attend because your future in-laws don't approve of my lifestyle, I countered. Seems we're both dealing with disappointment today. You have to fix this, she demanded. Call the venue right now and tell them to open the gates. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Brooke. I canceled everything. The venue, the caterers, the flowers, all of it. There is no wedding to attend even if they open the gates. There was a moment of stunned silence before Brooke spoke again, her voice low and threatening. The Camerons will sue you for this. They'll take everything you have. They're welcome to try, I said. My name is on every contract. I paid for everything from my own accounts. I have documentation of being explicitly uninvited from an event I was funding. I even consulted with an attorney before canceling anything. But please tell the Camerons to go ahead. I'd be happy to have this all come out in court. I could hear voices in the background on Brooke's end, urgent, angry voices. Then a new voice came on the line. This is James Cameron, he said, his tone clipped and authoritative. You've made a serious mistake, young lady. This vindictive stunt will cost you more than you can imagine. I have connections with every major law firm in Atlanta. When we're done with you, you won't even be able to afford a cardboard box to live in, Mr. Cameron," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Before you continue threatening me, you should know that I've documented everything. Every payment I made. Every text message where Brooke and your wife informed me I was unwelcome at the wedding because of my sexual orientation. I also have evidence that Brooke has been lying to you about who paid for this wedding. She's been taking credit for my financial contributions, while systematically excluding me from an event I funded entirely from my savings." There was a pause before he responded, his tone slightly less confident. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can. I have recordings of conversations where Brooke admitted she told you she paid for everything herself. I have text messages from your wife saying my lifestyle made me unsuitable to attend a Cameron family event. Would you like me to forward those to you? Or would you prefer I share them with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution? I hear they're very interested in stories about discrimination these days." The threat of public exposure hit its mark. James Cameron's voice dropped to a furious whisper. "What do you want, money? Is that it?" "I don't want your money, Mr. Cameron. I wanted to attend my sister's wedding. I wanted basic respect. After sacrificing my education and financial security to raise Brooke when our parents died. Since that wasn't possible, I simply decided not to fund an event where I wasn't welcome." The phone went silent for so long I thought he might have hung up. Then Brooke came back on the line sobbing. "How could you do this to me? On my wedding day. These people are going to be my family." "No, Brooke," I corrected her gently. "I was your family. I was the one who held you when you cried after Mom and Dad died. I was the one who worked 3 jobs so you could go to college. I was the one who gave up everything so you could have opportunities. And you threw me away the moment a richer, more socially acceptable family came along." "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "Neither was uninviting me from a wedding I paid for because your future in-laws are bigots," I replied. "Neither was lying about who funded this wedding. Neither was planning to cut me out of your life after getting what you needed from me." "What are we supposed to do now?" she asked, her voice small. "Everyone is here. Parker's whole family are friends. That's not my problem anymore," I said, surprised by how calm I felt. "You made your choice, Brooke. You chose the Camerons over me. Now, you get to explain to them, and everyone else, why there's no wedding today." I could hear Margaret Cameron in the background, her voice shrill with indignation. "Tell her we'll pay for everything right now. We'll wire the money immediately if she calls the vendors back." "It's too late for that," I said, loud enough for Margaret to hear. "The vendors have all been canceled. Most of them have already booked other events by now. Even with the Cameron fortune, you can't rebuild an entire wedding in the next hour." The realization seemed to hit Brooke all at once. "It's really canceled. All of it. There's nothing we can do." "That's right," I confirmed. "No venue, no catering, no flowers, no photographer, no wedding." Brooke's sobs grew louder. In the background, I could hear the rising commotion as guests were presumably being told the wedding was canceled. Through her tears, Brooke managed one final accusation. "You've ruined everything. I'll never forgive you for this." "That's okay," I said softly. "I don't think I'll ever forgive you either." I ended the call and sat in the stillness of my apartment, expecting to feel regret or guilt. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time since our parents died, I had put myself first. My phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. "They just announced the wedding is canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. Everyone's in shock. Parker looks like he's about to pass out." "What the hell happened?" I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off my phone, made myself another cup of coffee, and sat by the window watching the summer rain begin to fall. The storm that had been building inside me for months had finally broken, and in its wake was a strange, sad peace. Somewhere across town, Brooke was facing the consequences of her choices. And for once, I wasn't rushing to save her from them. 6 months passed without a word from Brooke. In that time, I focused on rebuilding what I had lost. I took on additional bookkeeping clients, worked extra hours, and slowly began to replenish my savings. It wasn't easy. The $53,000 I'd spent on Brooke's wedding represented years of careful frugality and sacrifice, but there was something empowering about starting over on my own terms. An unexpected opportunity arose when one of my clients, impressed by the detailed wedding budget spreadsheets she'd glimpsed on my computer, asked if I would help plan her daughter's wedding. "I need someone who's organized and understands budgets," she explained. "Someone who can help us get the most value without going overboard." I hesitated, unsure if wedding planning would bring back painful memories. But the practical side of me recognized a chance to earn extra income, doing something I'd become surprisingly good at. I agreed to help, charging a modest fee for my services. That first client led to another and then another. Soon I had a small side business in event management and budget planning. I created a simple website showcasing the organizational systems I'd developed, emphasizing my skill at creating beautiful events within financial constraints. I didn't mention Brooke's wedding, but I used the knowledge I'd gained from that experience to help others plan celebrations that were meaningful rather than merely extravagant. Taylor and I grew closer through it all. She had been my rock when everything fell apart, never once saying "I told you so," even though she'd warned me about the Camerons from the beginning. 6 months after the canceled wedding, she moved in with me, bringing warmth and laughter back into my life. I was working at my desk one rainy November afternoon when the doorbell rang. Taylor was at school teaching, so I answered it myself, expecting a package delivery. Instead, I found Brooke standing on my doorstep, soaking wet and looking nothing like the polished woman who had been so eager to join the Cameron family. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her clothes casual. She looked more like the sister I remembered from before Parker Cameron had entered our lives. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her enter. We sat in my small living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "I heard your business is doing well," she finally said. "Event planning, right?" That's good. Why are you here, Brooke?" I asked, too emotionally exhausted for small talk. She looked down at her hands. "Parker and I broke up. 3 months ago, actually." I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "After the wedding was canceled, everything fell apart," she explained. "The Camerons were humiliated. They blamed me for not handling you properly. Parker started questioning everything, our relationship, my honesty. When he found out I'd lied about paying for the wedding myself, he couldn't get past it. He said if I could lie about something that big, he couldn't trust me about anything." "I'm sorry your deception had consequences," I said, my tone neutral. Brooke flinched but continued. "I lost my job, too. Margaret made some calls. Suddenly my performance reviews weren't so positive anymore. I've been temping and living with a friend from college. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy. That's rough." "I didn't come for pity," she said quickly. "I came to say I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough for what I did to you. I let the Camerons change me into someone I didn't even recognize. I chose their approval over the one person who had always been there for me." Why, I asked the question that had haunted me for months. "After everything we'd been through together, how could you just throw me away?" Tears filled Brooke's eyes. "I thought their world was better than ours. Easier. Safer. Growing up with so little, always struggling. When I saw how the Camerons lived, it was like a fairy tale. I convinced myself that if I could just fit into their world perfectly, I'd never have to worry about anything again. So I was what collateral damage. You were a reminder of where I came from," she admitted. "And the Camerons made it clear that my past, our past, wasn't good enough for them. I was weak and selfish. I let them manipulate me because I wanted what they had. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did. And I'm truly sorry." I studied my sister's face, seeing both the familiar features of the girl I'd raised and the stranger she had become. "I didn't cancel your wedding out of vengeance," I said, finally. I did it because I finally valued myself enough to stop enabling your behavior. For years, I put your needs ahead of my own. I sacrificed my education, my savings, my self-respect, all to help you succeed. And you took it all for granted. Brooke nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. You deserved better from me. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago, I continued. I'm not going to sacrifice myself for you anymore. But you're still my sister. I'm willing to try to build something new between us with clear boundaries and mutual respect. It won't be the same as before. And it will take time. I'd like that, Brooke whispered. I miss my big sister. I've missed you too, I admitted. The real you. Not the person trying to impress the Camerons. We agreed to start with small steps. Weekly phone calls. Occasional coffee meetings. I suggested we both see a family counselor to work through the damage that had been done. And to my surprise, Brooke readily agreed. Over the following year, we slowly rebuilt our relationship. It wasn't always easy. There were difficult conversations, painful truths, and moments when old wounds reopened. But there were also glimpses of the bond we had once shared, laughing over shared memories, supporting each other through new challenges, remembering our parents together. As my event planning business grew, I set aside a portion of the profits to establish a small scholarship for LGBT youth from rural Georgia who wanted to pursue higher education. It wasn't much, just $2,000 a year to start, but it felt right to create something positive from my own thwarted educational dreams. Brooke found a new job at a smaller marketing firm and began dating again, this time choosing partners based on character rather than social status. When she met Scott, a kind-hearted teacher who loved her for exactly who she was, I saw genuine happiness in her eyes that had nothing to do with impressing anyone. 3 years after the canceled wedding, I helped plan a very different ceremony for Brooke and Scott. It was small and intimate, held in the garden of a local restaurant with just 30 guests. Brooke insisted on paying for everything herself, though I offered my planning services as a gift. Before the ceremony, Brooke took my hands in hers. I almost lost you because I couldn't see what truly mattered, she said. I thought I needed approval from people like the Camerons to be happy. But real happiness comes from being surrounded by people who love you for who you are, not what you can do for them or how you make them look. It took us both a while to learn that, I replied, squeezing her hands. As I watched my sister marry a man who treasured her authentic self with Taylor by my side and a small circle of genuine friends around us, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought us here. The wedding that never happened had forced both Brooke and me to confront difficult truths about ourselves and our relationship. The collapse of her carefully constructed facade had ultimately freed her to build a more authentic life. And my decision to finally stand up for myself, to say no more to being used and discarded, had allowed me to discover my own worth beyond what I could give to others. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do, both for ourselves and for those who take us for granted, is to stop enabling behavior that harms us both. By canceling that wedding, I had lost my sister temporarily, but in doing so, I had found myself permanently. And eventually I got a truer version of my sister back as well. Life rarely gives us perfect endings. Relationships damaged by betrayal never fully return to what they once were. But sometimes, if we're brave enough to hold people accountable and patient enough to allow for genuine change, we can build something new from the ashes of what was lost. Something imperfect, but honest, fragile, but real. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have canceled the wedding or gone through with funding it despite being uninvited? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you found my story meaningful, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most difficult decisions lead to the most necessary growth.